only an 8th generation. Our boys are 10th generation Tennesseans. And so you can start to understand why this is very personal to us. We're proud of the people that come here and that they're the first in their family to choose Tennessee as a destination to move to. We get it. And we understand that you don't come to Tennessee because you're hoping that this state will become more like the one you left. You come to Tennessee because you embrace what we're all about. And as I like to say, we're the state that saved Texas at the Alamo. We marched down there and we bailed them out of some trouble, and we gave our lives for that purpose. A congressman by the name of Davy Crockett, you may know, led that charge. One of my favorite movies as a child was The Alamo, where John Wayne played Davy Crockett. And back when there were these places called Blockbuster and Hollywood Video, and it was my turn to choose the movie for the week, I would choose either The Alamo or The Cowboys. And I've always kind of liked that renegade spirit that you see, the real American spirit, which is fierce independence, right? And in Tennessee, you have the ability to exercise your independence and make your shot at the American dream, or what I like to call the Tennessee dream. We don't believe in equity here in Tennessee. We believe in equality, equal opportunity. That when you give people an equal opportunity at their Tennessee dream, they stand a pretty good shot of achieving it. They may fail, but succeeding is what it's really all about, and that journey is our story. And tonight, I'm here representing someone who pursued their Tennessee dream. 8th generation Tennessean, as I mentioned, that was born and raised in Cookeville, Tennessee, as the youngest of 4 children, the son of a teacher and a farmer. He took his dream, his Tennessee dream, and he ran with it. When he was a student at Vanderbilt Law School, please excuse him for going to Vanderbilt Law School. I'm a proud University of Tennessee graduate. Before that, I graduated from Tennessee Tech and got my master's degree in agriculture at UT, and proud of that. I said when I graduated that day, I finally became a Lady Vol. But while he was at Vanderbilt Law School, he and a fellow student, they hatched an idea for a business, and they didn't come from wealthy families where their parents or the friends of their parents were able to give them money to start their business. No, they had to scratch and scrape and plan and do what they could to succeed. And as I said, they sometimes failed along the way. But ultimately, because they believed in themselves and they laid it on the line for their dream, they found success. That business idea was training IT professionals. Now, my husband was raised on a farm. He was raised farming and grew up working, cleaning out fence rows, setting tobacco, milking cows. If you've ever done any of that, you know the work ethic that's involved in those things. If you haven't done it, I hope you can at least appreciate the work ethic involved in those things. And so IT, wow, what a foreign concept to someone who comes from a farm background. But they saw this opportunity to train IT professionals to earn their Microsoft certification. And in the 1990s, that was starting to become big business. And so a lot like the ACT prep courses you'll see high school students taking, or the LSAT prep courses that law school students took, which is sort of what inspired John and his friend, they decided we should provide that kind of service to IT professionals who want to go into this field. So they did that. In the course of going from absolutely nothing except a cheap apartment in Nashville, in the course of 8 years, they trained 4.5 million people around the world. And they started it with no outside investment. And at the end of those 8 years, they were able to sell that company, of course, for a very large profit. And we started another business. And today, John is a CEO. And if you ask me, what do I look for in the people that I want to vote for? Well, number one, I want to know they believe in the things that matter to me. So that they're gonna stand up for what matters to me. Faith, family, and freedom. We put God first in everything that we do. Number two, that they have an understanding of our Constitution and they're not going to let our rights slip away, because it doesn't happen overnight. It happens little by little. And we have to keep and maintain our rights, and sometimes we got to take it back a little bit. The freedom piece is extremely important to John and I, because I think that was the baseline for his story of success. But I would also tell you that it matters to me that we have someone in charge who's ready to lead on day one. Someone who's built more than just a political campaign. And my husband has done that. He's done it by the sweat of his brow. He's experienced what everyday Tennesseans experience, and he's had people to count on him for their livelihood. You know, on Fridays, on the last Friday of the month, when it's time to distribute paychecks, he was the one who had to make sure that there was enough money in the account to meet payroll. And during the recession, there were times when he literally spent multiple nights where he would not sleep at his office there in Nashville, making sure that he could make ends meet for his employees. I recently saw a post during the May graduation season from one of his coworkers. It was of his family, and his son had just graduated from high school in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. And he was the youngest in the family. Will is his name. And they were celebrating him. And I was thinking to myself how special it is that I can look at this picture and know that my husband, his friend, a man who works for him, who he would say works with him, that he's experiencing success because John stepped out and put himself forward and formed this business, and people count on him. Now, why does that matter for Tennesseans? Well, right now, the number one thing we're hearing on the campaign trail is we are being priced out of our own state. It costs too much to live here. We can't keep our house. Property taxes are going up. We can't afford to buy a house, or we have to downsize. My child, my grown adult, cannot buy a house for themselves. They're renting. And in many cases, they're renting from big Wall Street firms that have come in and bought up existing neighborhoods or built neighborhoods of their own and turned them into rental properties. Now, I believe that a big cornerstone of the American dream is home ownership. When you can start young, building equity early in life, you start to build some independence, and independence is part of freedom. That's part of what I'm talking about. You have to have your own 2 feet to stand on. We need a governor who's going to step up and stop those big Wall Street firms from coming into Tennessee, buying up our land, who's going to stop foreign nations from coming into Tennessee and buying up our land. Now, I've been asked this a couple of times recently. There's sadly an attack ad running on John right now that he has somehow helped China buy farmland in Tennessee. And I don't blame you if you take these things seriously, and I'm going to give you a serious response about that. John has been firm that China should not own American soil, period. Whether it's farmland, whether it's any other land in America, let alone in Tennessee. And there is zero evidence that he has ever supported any purchase of land from China in Tennessee. We have legislators in the room that have made sure that China is banned from buying property here in Tennessee. The trick that they try to pull is they'll do it under someone else's name. They'll try to disguise themselves as some other entity. Here's why that matters. We don't want China buying land in our country, of course, because we don't want them competing with American citizens for our own land. But number two, if you ask John this question, he oftentimes uses this example. When he visited Fort Campbell recently and saw our impressive airfield, the equipment that we have there that our military is ready to use to defend our nation and, if need be, to attack. When he saw this, it occurred to him very vividly how similar that scene was to the scene at Pearl Harbor that we see the photos of with all the planes lined up, and the tragedy that occurred at Pearl Harbor we all are well familiar with. If China buys farmland or any land near a military base, and they build one of these big metal buildings you'll see on any farm across Tennessee, and they were to fill it full of drones, if, say, they attacked Taiwan, and they understood that the United States is going to have an issue with that, they may make a preemptive strike on a place like Fort Campbell, and they would be ready to deploy from a place that could be near one of our military bases. That's one example of why it matters that we don't allow foreign ownership of our land. One of the things that you'll hear in that ad is him saying, "I'm not gravely concerned with that." The full context of that interview would tell you It bothers me that they're buying businesses, American businesses. I'm not gravely concerned about the land because we'll just take it back. That's what he believes. It's still here. We have the ability to take back what is ours if we discover that China has purchased our land. So that's an issue that John is absolutely committed to. And if you needed further evidence about that, his passion for agriculture and our family farm certainly stands on its own, but I'm here to refute that negative ad. That's not the kind of campaign that we want to run. Honestly, we're focused on, yeah, thank you. We're focused on what Tennesseans want for the future. And there's a simple slogan that we've adopted on our campaign, and it goes like this: keep Tennessee, Tennessee. I started tonight by saying that if you moved here, you didn't come here because you wanted Tennessee to be more like Illinois, New York, California, you name the place. You came here because you recognize what we in this room know to be true, that Tennessee is the greatest state in the greatest nation in the history of the world. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
I'm proud to be a Tennessean, and I know that those in this room are too. Republicans happen to be more patriotic than Democrats. Is that a surprise to you? We need a governor who's proud to be an American, who's proud to be a Tennessean, and has proven that they will stand up for the things that matter to you. The 5 things that John talks about on the campaign trail are education, infrastructure, all that goes along with infrastructure, of course, healthcare, giving our Tennesseans access to good quality healthcare, energy, producing the energy that we need to power the future. And number 5 is job creation so that our young people can stay at home. I often say I'm not raising 10th generation Tennesseans so that they can move off and be first generation Alabamans because they can't afford to live here. No way, not doing that. And Guy, you would never cheer for Alabama, right? No. No way. In fact, I have a priceless video of Guy at a Tennessee football game, and I put him in a cowboy hat, and he has a UT jersey on where he's dancing the Rocky Top. It's pretty good. So we're raising him right. You know, our hopes and dreams are not so much focused on ourselves, right? It's about the people around us, and oftentimes it's hardest for us to see those we care about suffer, and it's most concerning when we see those we care about taking risks and taking on new things. And so when I talk about my husband, just know that I'm talking about someone who cares more to me than anybody on this earth. And when I give my endorsement of him, I give my endorsement as someone who's very informed about a man who is an outstanding father, a God-sent husband to me of more than 15 years, and I believe that he will make a great governor for the state of Tennessee. I am happy to answer any questions you may have. We've been taking a tour across the state, which John is continuing without me right now in West Tennessee because I wanted to come here to this Karns Republican meeting, and thank you for inviting me. I'm missing an event in Lawrence County right now, but he is on his 40th town hall of the campaign just since May 2nd. And so we haven't been able to we are participating in the forum on Friday night. We haven't been able to get a debate with all of the candidates. He wants to do that, but until then, he's been having free, publicly advertised town halls, asking people to bring their questions, concerns, and ideas, and he's giving unscripted, and as I say, sort of teasing imperfect answers all along the way. So any questions tonight? Yes, sir.
2 questions. We've got a healthcare crisis in the greater Knoxville area. Our legislative delegation made a request to the governor this past year, and it didn't make the cut. But it's not going away, and I hope the governor-elect Congressman Rose will take it seriously, because we have a situation that is beneath the dignity of civilized people in the middle of our community. It is a real issue. So I don't expect a follow-up from you, but just please take that back to the campaign. You mentioned affordability. You mentioned business. There's an economic literacy piece that is central to the big, beautiful bill, the tax legislation that was passed a year ago. And we have people running for Senate and all sorts of positions. And I pay pretty close attention to what is said and what people stand for. I have yet to hear any one person talk about the merits of that legislation because it has a real impact on Republicans down ballot and really across the board, because the Democrats think they've got the whip hand on this affordability discussion. Republicans have passed the legislation, and I have heard not a single person talk about it.
I think that's a great point. It's the largest tax cut we've seen in modern history, and Republicans sort of got outmaneuvered by Democrats who were calling it the one big ugly bill. They were calling it all kinds of things last year, and I think because sometimes concepts that come down from Washington get complicated through the stream of television and whatnot, that we let Democrats get ahead of us on that. But we absolutely should not. We should own that issue. You're right. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime. You know, the Republican Party is the party of the blue-collar worker. And 30 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago, we might not have said that, right? I mean, you would have said it, but you maybe would get disputed by Democrats. Democrats have turned their party into the party of wokeness. All they care about is making a point, not making a life, and we, as Republicans, are tasked with doing that. One Big Beautiful Bill is a practical example of how we're delivering results for American people, and you're right, anybody running for office, definitely go read more about it, because it's lots of great talking points inside that legislation, which John supported in Congress.
You may not believe this, but they mentioned the latest meetings right now in the public. Are those questions, are they more advanced what the questions are?
So he's asking about the forum this Friday night, and so it's not a debate, but it is a forum, and some of the questions are given in advance, some of them are drawn. Apparently, the audience will have a chance to submit some questions, and then the questions will be drawn and read to the candidates on the audience and on the stage, and that'll deliver a mix of kind of, you know, thoughtful answers to the issues that the East Tennessee Young Republicans have identified, along with some ad hoc discussion on things that come from the audience. Yes, sir.
Chelsea, will you mention about what John has done to help save the veterans, veterans,
Clinic.
trying to think of a medical care
Yes.
unit that was, being closed down?
Yes, sir, yes, and what he's referring to is there's a veterans clinic in Warren County that was on track to be closed, and it was an important resource for veterans. This is why healthcare matters generally, but especially we want our veterans in their elderly years to have easy access to the healthcare they've earned and deserve. Healthcare generally, we don't want people who receive these grim diagnoses to have to travel hours multiple times a week to get the treatment they need, or to be just with beyond driving distance of the care that they need. This is why it matters that we bring healthcare locally, and that it doesn't only reside in the very largest cities, but that we continue to spread it out. It'll also relieve waiting rooms in the largest cities when we do that. In this case, what happened is the Warren County Veterans Clinic, this was a matter of somebody with a red pen in Washington marking them just a line on a piece of paper and said, we're gonna close that one, they can go somewhere else. John, along with Congressman Scott Desjardins, during a critical vote about a month ago, Leah, I guess it was, they said, whoa, you know, we will work with you guys, but you gotta work with us here. We have a veterans clinic right there in Tennessee. They share Warren County in their congressional districts, that we need to keep open because the veterans there have spoken up. And I think that matters too, by the way, that as citizens, you coming to this meeting and meetings like this and conversations that are happening outside these four walls, that matters so much because your legislators, like the ones in the room, future Senator Matlock there, they need to be able to say, I'm hearing this from the people I represent. There's nothing more powerful for your representative in government than to be able to say, I'm hearing this from the people I represent. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm a 6-year escapee from the communist state of Connecticut. Thank you. I look at this from a different perspective. I've never lived in the South until I came here. And the concern I see is, so back in 1991, Connecticut got an income tax from the Republicans. The last vote was a Republican. And I watched growing up and getting involved in politics, the Republicans were the ones that were creating problems in Connecticut because of lack of principle. We're having this problem with the SAVE Act, which I know where John stands on it. the people like me are moving here, want to escape this craziness. We fought it, we've lived it, we hate it, we don't want it. The concern I see, and this is not meant as disrespect, but people who've lived it have a different perspective on it. And I see a lot of the signs where a lot of natives here don't see these signs. And I've talked to John, I know him, you know me, and how can you integrate learning from what Georgia did wrong, made them a light red state, learning what North Carolina did, learning what Florida did, which eventually became conservative. Because, we have a law in the books in Tennessee that it's a crime to carry a firearm. And our governor and attorney general are fighting the lawsuit that the good folks of the Gun Owners of America won to give us our rights back. How can you talk to someone like use me as an example, or others like me who are coming here for freedom, we don't want it, and we're concerned about what we're seeing. We're seeing these habits, and if you can elaborate on that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, you have a critical part to play in the future of Tennessee, which is you're the canary in the coal mine, and we have to have that. I think identifying places where, hey, you're about to step off a ledge here that I don't think you meant to step off matters. And, for those of you who have had the misfortune of seeing a whole lot of campaign ads on TV, you've probably seen my husband talking about protecting Tennessee. It's the main theme of his campaign. Don't be surprised if others focus harder on that as election day comes closer, because we are getting a tremendous response from Tennesseans. I think, to your point, it's oftentimes, it's not really the everyday Tennesseans who struggle to realize what you're talking about. Sometimes it's the folks who are being lobbied, that are being brought precedent from other states and maybe being fed something that isn't completely good for Tennessee, that need to, as I said, hear from the voters, hear from the people they represent. They're relying on us, and we have to stand up. And I would just tell you that I married a bulldog, and I love dogs, so it worked out well. I married a bulldog. When Phil Bredesen was mayor of Nashville, the Tennessee State Fair was in Nashville for over 100 years. And when he was mayor of Nashville, he drained the fund that supported the Tennessee State Fair and said, there's better things we can do with our money instead of have a Tennessee State Fair. We don't need it. And you guys have fairs around here, and I know there's an ongoing discussion about the future of the Tennessee Valley Fair, even right here in Knox County. But John, being just a average Joe regular citizen, not an elected official, having never run for office at all, he stepped up and said, no, this is not okay. Our fair, the Tennessee State Fair, matters. The #1 industry in Tennessee is agriculture. It's right there on our seal. This is an example of staying true to Tennessee. And so he stepped up for 12 years as an unpaid volunteer, formed a nonprofit organization and chaired it, and they saved the Tennessee State Fair. And I would tell you that those kind of things matter. That's what makes Tennessee, Tennessee. We need to have someone who is not for their own personal benefit, not for any reason other than it's the right thing to do, willing to step up and make tough calls and take action in the face of adversity. And that's just one example of how we do that.
I'm a big believer in public education. My mom taught until she retired. Sisters taught till they retired. Generations before them. I don't understand how we call the voucher system, where we're taking money and putting it toward private education that does not have to comply with all of the federal regulations that the public schools do. And yet, everyone I know already had their kids in private school and are getting the vouchers. So far, I haven't met anyone that used it as a way of taking their children from a poor system and putting them in private school. I also know people, I have a lady whose son was moved to 4 different schools. They were private schools, but they had the option of kicking them out and saying, well, you can't go there anymore, so she found another school. I don't think she was getting a voucher, but the concept that a school can say, okay, too much trouble, out you go. And our public schools cannot do that. So how is it that we can take money and put it there and we're losing positions in Knox County because of funding issues.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing up this topic. I said it's the number one thing that John talks about along the campaign trail is education. And it's not because when we poll people that that's what they say they're most concerned about for the future. As a matter of fact, we just did a poll recently, which we were very excited about the general ballot results that showed John coming up and his opponent coming down. But one of the things we asked was, what's your number one concern for the future of Tennessee? Well, only 3%, 3.2% responded education. And that's because I think a lot of people get kind of comfortable with whatever they've chosen. John would say, if he were here, that he believes that parents should have a choice, and that they do have a choice about where their children go to school. They should have a choice between sending them to private school, public school, or homeschooling, and that the government should intervene as little as possible in what their choice is. He also believes that if he's elected governor, he's going to immediately bring parents, teachers, and school administrators to the table for real discussions. Right now, I would tell you that we have a problem in Tennessee with groups that aren't based in Tennessee, but they give thousands of dollars to candidates and literally millions of dollars in an election cycle to push issues that they care about because of their national agenda, not because they have any plans of ever living in Tennessee. And education is one of those areas that has been highly impacted by lobbyists and by money from outside our state. I'm proud to say that 92% of the campaign contributions to John's gubernatorial campaign came from Tennessee. Only 26% from inside Tennessee is what's funding Marsha Blackburn's campaign. 74% come from out of state. Now I say that because I think that's super relevant to your questions. In Tennessee, here's what we ought to be willing to do. Our public schools deserve our support, so we're trying something. Our legislature has put forth a plan, they're trying this. But we ought to be willing to, and I trust that our legislature is, look at the results. We're trying it, let's look at the results. If the results tell the story of success, then that's great, it's working, we should do it. If the results show that it's not working, we should talk about a different path forward. I think that's the difference between Republicans and Democrats. They led us to having poor schools for years and years and years, we ranked at the bottom. Republicans are getting innovative and we're trying new things. There are areas in Knox County where you don't have a good school to choose from, and those families need some help. But I feel the same way you do, that there are instances that seem to be right in front of us where families that didn't need the financial support, they're receiving it, and I think all that's going to happen is private school tuition's going to go up. But I think we need to look at the results. Let's see what happens. 89% of Tennessee students will graduate from a public high school. 89%. So it matters that public schools succeed. Our two boys, and this is parent choice. Our two boys go to public school. I don't begrudge anybody that homeschools. In fact, I think that's great. My sister homeschools her child who has ADD, and it's a great fit for them. I don't begrudge anybody that goes to private school. In fact, there's plenty of great examples of private school being a blessing to children, and the list goes on for the benefits of private school. For my boys, though, in our community, it works, and it's the right call for us. So I think one of the commitments you ought to know, though, from John, that he announced the day he announced his campaign, was that he will appoint a commissioner of education who has actually taught in a Tennessee public school classroom.
I want your husband to be my governor, and one of the things that appeals to me about his viability is his network amongst the rural parts of our state. 85 counties are rural in character. When I go to the TVA&I Fair, and I'm a city boy, when I go to the TVA&I Fair, what I'm most impressed with is the responsibility, the animal husbandry, the stewardship of young kids who are up milking the chickens at 4 o'clock in the morning. And so when you talk about ag, it's not just an industry, it's not just a part of the state. I think there's a cultural piece where I think rural people are the salvation of the world, to tell you the truth, because there's responsibility that is sorely lacking in other parts of the community. So please go forth with enthusiasm on that.
I will, and I think one of the things that I really appreciate that Bill Lee brought to the forefront is vocational education. I'm a product, and John is too, of vocational education, career and technical education, people call it. We were both enrolled in those classes. I was part of the Future Business Leaders of America, but the one organization that I would credit most with anything good about me, other than my upbringing in church, came from the FFA, Future Farmers of America. I wasn't raised on a farm, but what FFA does is every single student who goes through the classroom is required to have a project outside of school that is a hands-on learning experience. And I think for our young people, they need to know that there's dignity in knowing a skill, in having something you can do with these two things. Because no matter what AI and technology brings us, they will never be able to replace a plumber or a welder. We need to produce those right here in Tennessee. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with a student. If a student doesn't want to pursue a 4-year degree, it may not be the right fit for them. Why shove somebody down a path that's going to end in student debt if we can instead push them down a path that will lead to their Tennessee dream?
Since 2010, the state has put a lot of effort and time and taxpayer money into recruiting businesses under 26. Prior to, say, 2000, not many businesses wanted to come to Tennessee. We've been successful, legislature's been successful, ECD's been successful. We've seen $800 million go forward. We've seen $500 million of taxpayer money go to the college. We've seen millions of dollars go to Amazon in Tennessee. Recently, we saw $30 million of taxpayer money go to Starbucks and bring them to Nashville. We've seen what's happened in Nashville.
Yeah.
We don't really like it. When has Congressman Rose given any thought as to when is enough enough, and when should we back off giving this so-called corporate welfare to these very successful companies?
I think if I could turn your question into a statement, you will have answered that question for me, honestly. And what John would tell you is that we do not need to invite woke corporations to Tennessee. The truth of the matter is, if a company like Starbucks wants to come to Tennessee, they're going to come here without us handing them a dime. Here's the reality. You can come to the state of Tennessee right now, and you can prosper in a way that you simply cannot in 49 out of the other states in the United States of America. We don't have to hasten their arrival. I firmly believe that if the state of Tennessee had not agreed to give a fast-track grant to Starbucks, they still would have chosen Tennessee as their southeast corporate headquarters. And so there is a line to draw. And I think when you hire a CEO as governor, you're hiring someone who's sat at the bargaining table before, someone who understands the value of what they're representing matters, someone who has been in the real world, who has gone and had to negotiate deals like this. You know, I think that experience is quite relevant for our next governor, someone who is not content to say, well, this is what we've been doing, and so it's what we should continue to do. Part of our affordability problem is wrapped up in this growth. And what we don't want, we want to grow, but we don't want our growth to be out of control. We need to take back a little bit of our power as Tennesseans, and we need to control it a little bit, because what's happening is we have people on fixed incomes who they retired, let's say 10 or 15 years ago, even 5 years ago, and they anticipated a certain set of circumstances in this state that haven't come to exist. Instead, when they go to buy their groceries, instead of spending $50 on what would provide for them and their spouse for a few nights, it's going to be $100. And then you extrapolate that across the gas pump, what you're paying for your insurance, what you pay if you want to have a little outbuilding in your backyard and have a little garden. Well, it starts to infringe upon your future and your dreams. And so it matters that we grow, but we should do it responsibly. When we were in Granger County, we met a couple. They had moved to Tennessee from Florida. They were both former lawyers, like my husband, as he says, recovering lawyer. They had moved here. They were executives with big businesses down in Florida and had experienced a lot of success, but they didn't want to retire there because it's so expensive. People were moving from everywhere. Their growth is out of control. They were choosing between Western North Carolina and East Tennessee. And These people are very thoughtful, smart folks, planning things out. They were writing down their expenses and future expenses that they should anticipate with the tax structures that exist in both places. What they found was the difference between moving to western North Carolina and East Tennessee and the cities they were considering, you know, let's say conservatively within 200 miles of each other. The difference would pay for their entire home in East Tennessee. So it was a no-brainer. For a CEO, they come to the table thinking, let's leave with both parties happy. So what that means in this case, there's a middle ground. When a wealthy couple from Florida moves into Tennessee, and a couple that's lived in Granger County for 10 plus years has to help pay for the infrastructure required by their new home on the hill, you know, that becomes a burden to everyday Tennesseans that maybe isn't quite fair. Maybe we should start asking about, is there an impact fee? Is there something we could negotiate with incoming businesses and citizens that would make sense for our state? And I'll go back to John and let him know that you mentioned this, but he's a big believer in, there's gotta be a line in the sand where we're keeping Tennessee, we're growing responsibly, and we're not relegating existing Tennesseans to moving outside the state. Yeah. Yes?
Obviously, I know the answer to this question, but speaking of growth and infrastructure, I was driving across Knoxville earlier today and was on a state road and it was just in a rush. When I was a kid, that wasn't the case, but we've had so many folks move in from all these places that, you know, they wanna be here. Our roads are kind of struggling, so can you tell us a little bit about John's thoughts on our roads?
Yes, we've taken our eye off the ball on roads. I hear him, you could probably, I'm like a little recording device, by the way, at this point. I've heard him, had so many town halls. Everybody asks about roads. So I can give you the verbatim response he can give, and I'll roughly give that. He always starts with, we've taken our eye off the ball. So you all know when roads in Tennessee were great, right? It was a long time ago. And embarrassingly for us, it was under Democrat control. Our roads have kind of slid. Now our population has grown at the same time, so this is where you see a difference in the parties. We have hastened growth as Republicans. I think to your point, Chairman, about people wanting to come here, it happened around the same time Republicans took control, right? So naturally, our growth has been hastened. And then we had Democrats who, you know, do what they do best, they spin like drunken sailors. So our roads look really nice. We have to find a balance there. We have to have someone who's gonna lead these next 8 years and understand we're facing an almost $60 billion project list from TDOT. That is, you know, equal to our state budget for a year. So we're not gonna catch up with our needs anytime soon. It's gonna be incremental gains. Now, I told you it took my husband 12 years to finally fend off those who wanted to end the state fair. It took him 8 years to build his business into a success. It took him till he was 44 to finally get married, okay? He doesn't let time stand in his way of getting the job done. He wouldn't let it get in his way in getting roads fixed in Tennessee. It's not gonna happen overnight. It's gotta start with small steps. But he cast a big vision when he announced his run for governor, and he said he wants to expand our interstate system in Tennessee, which again will relieve areas like Knox County. It will drive traffic outward a little bit, start to relieve the hub here. And all those people who don't live here are taking those cut-arounds, because that's the best way to get around all this traffic. We'll stop wearing out those little roads because we can keep our cars moving up and down the interstate. Thank you for letting me speak to you.